On September 22 of this year, Artemis Yukovsky led us in a service entitled The Liberation of the Human Spirit. Artemis told us the story of his grandparents, the Reverend Waitstill Sharp, a Wellesley, Massachusetts Unitarian minister, and his wife Martha, a social worker. In 1939, they accepted a mission leaving their children behind to travel to Prague, Czechoslovakia, to rescue Jews, dissidents, refugees, and their children during World War II. After narrowly avoiding the Gestapo, the Sharps returned to France in 1940, continuing their relief efforts, representing the newly formed Unitarian Service Committee. The story is powerfully told in Artemis's book, Defying the Nazis, and the Ken Burns documentary based on the book by the same name, available in PBS Passport. Coincidentally, 1 week before, my wife Gail and I were standing on Omaha Beach in Normandy. We were looking south towards Idaho Beach, and then turned and looked north towards Juneau and Gold beaches. Beaches where American, Canadian, and British troops landed 80 years ago to fight evil. We visited the three country cemeteries where over 9,000 troops are buried. Archibald MacLeish's poem, The Young Dead Soldiers, captures my thoughts. They say, we leave you our deaths. Give them their meaning. We were young. We have died. Remember us. I became especially choked up in the American cemetery when I noticed that two brothers were buried there. In all, 45 sets of brothers are buried in the American cemetery, including Quentin and Theodore Roosevelt Jr., the sons of President Theodore Roosevelt. There are also 4 women from all-black, all-female unit in the Women's Army Corps buried there. I could not imagine how the families must have felt about sending their children to a country that perhaps they had never been in, that they didn't know the language, not knowing what they would face. My brother and I served roughly at the same time during the Vietnam War. Jack was a naval officer from February 1966 to September 1970. He went in country, that is, to Vietnam, from August 1968 to June 1969, and he returned in good health. I enlisted in the Air Force in October 1968 and served on active duty, as you heard. I never left this country or faced combat. Our son Todd served as a Marine Corps officer in a combat unit in Afghanistan in 2011. He also returned in good health. All our experiences were different, and they certainly were different from the families in World War II. When my brother went to Vietnam, he and his wife had just had their first child. He wrote her a letter in January and got one back 6 months later. But that was communication. At that time, I was stationed in North Texas. I grew up in Maryland. And I would call my parents once a month, every Sunday at night, and reverse the charges, because it was cheaper. When Todd was in Afghanistan, he emailed me every week. We talked on the phone. That's the difference. The one thing that my son and my brother and I all have in common, though, is while our experiences were different, we all knew people who died in war or returned with injuries, physical and mental, such as PTSD. In my service, at one point my primary station was in Illinois. I worked at a regional Air Force hospital. It was a surgical center for people returning from Vietnam that had injuries and needed surgery. The reading this morning from Dr. Edward Tick's book, War and Soul, as was mentioned, Dr. Tick is a psychotherapist who treats PTSD in war combatants. The work he does is often described in our religious teachings as soul repair. It is a healing, comforting work that goes to the core of humanity. The work of the Sharps during World War II is also a form of soul repair. It embraces living love through the practice of repair, through their work of guiding people through a safer life. This Veterans Day holiday is my invitation to recognize the military as a spiritual path. That spiritual path is the path a soldier must travel in war, through the ultimate sacrifice, injury, and hopefully repair. It is also the path we all travel as we wrestle with the complexities of our lives. The way is strewn with deep moral callings, tangled ethical dilemmas, and inevitable spiritual discernment. All the world's religions guide us down this path. In Judaism, Tikkun Olam has been interpreted as repairing the world. That phrase may be found in the major Old Testament prophet Isaiah. This is chapter 58, verse 12. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to live in. When repairing the world, God is invited into the relationship. In Christianity, the New Testament parable of the Good Samaritan, found in Luke and the wisdom literature of James, calls believers to put their faith into action. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. based his lifelong advocacy for civil rights on, among others, the moral injunction found actually in the Old Testament Amos, as quoted in his letter from the Birmingham jail, to let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. This same grounding is found in Islam and Buddhism, Shintoism. Gandhi captured it wonderfully when he stated that prayer, variously described as the spinning wheel, the rosary, and the Raman Nama, is all the same to me. They serve the same end. They teach me the religion of service. Following all of that, our Unitarian is grounded on deeds, not creeds, as found in the book of James, chapter 5, verse 22. Longtime minister Reverend Bob Murphy stood in this pulpit and reminded us, if you ask me what I believe, you're asking the wrong question. Ask me what I do. I've been a member of the UU Society for Community Ministries for over 25 years. Our work is beyond the walls of churches as we are called to put our faith in action. We have 146 members around the world. We gather on Zoom the first Friday of every month and exchange what we're up to. Some of the ministers are ordained, some have a recognized affiliation with the UU congregation, and some, like me, are simply lay ministers. We have members who are involved in hospital and prison chaplaincies. One of our members lived on the streets of San Francisco ministering to the mental health needs of the homeless. Another friend made a joyful noise in her ministry of leading a choral group called the Golden Tones, a 60-member senior chorus that performed at nursing homes, senior clubs, and intergenerational community events. So how does this differ from any one of the rest of us who feel called to compassion and caring support of others, or those who selflessly work for social justice? This congregation is a member of the Cape Cod Council of Churches. The council has 6 ministries that serve people in need on Cape Cod and the islands. The Baby Center last year provided over 500,000 diapers to families who could not afford to buy them. The Covenant to Care for Foster Families provides resources and emotional support to foster parents. The Faith Family Kitchen provides meals to those who have food security issues. Hands of Hope Food Pantry and Outreach Center provide emergency assistance to our neighbors. The homeless ministries provide basic needs such as food, water, clothing, and emergency shelter for a local unhoused community, and hospital chaplaincy ministering through God's love to those who are suffering from injury, illness, or disease. I'm looking at all of you. We have people in this congregation who served in the Peace Corps and other national organizations. We have people that serve in local organizations like the Falmouth Service Center, Neighborhood Falmouth, our Social Environmental Action Committee, and organizations that are listed at the alternative gift market referenced earlier. And some of our people are there now, probably to avoid my sermon. One of them is my wife. But also to just be volunteer staff for accepting money and registering people that are willing to give to these organizations, the wonderful organizations listed at the alternative gift market. At St. Barnabas, it starts at 11, and I'll have you out by then. It ends at 3. But go into the communications room right outside here and look at the wall, and there's all these brochures for organizations that serve others. Consider our board of directors. I'm looking at you too. And the many committees maintaining the building, our finances, and caring for one another in this congregation. I'm always amazed when I hear about service to others that is being given by one of you to somebody that needs it. It doesn't stop there. Don't forget the uplifting work of our music. Listen closely to the anthem that is coming up in a few minutes, called Listen. When you make a simple phone call to a friend or neighbor you haven't seen in a while and are concerned about, you are bringing comfort to that person and maybe even some joy. You may think that all you're doing is listening, but as one sage has put it, being listened to is so close to being loved, most people can't tell the difference. So thank you for your service. As the Reverend Dr. King put it so well, everybody can be great because everybody can serve. You don't have to have a college degree to serve. You don't have to make your subject and your verb agree to serve. You don't have to know about Plato and Aristotle to serve. You don't have to know Einstein's theory of relativity to serve. You don't have to know, well, I don't even know what this is, the second theory of thermodynamics in physics to serve. You only need a heart full of grace, a soul generated by love, and you can be that servant. Amen.